Welcome back to another Zero Context Patreon Stark, advertising my Patreon content one out of context theater moment at a time. I started the month off by wrapping up the first of the Janitors books before jumping into the second book of the Minion-ship series, The Lion of the Sea. Then I rounded out the month and the year with Janitors, Secrets of New Forest Academy. The lady son was probably confused, said the woman officer. Yeah, chuckled the other. Who's going to abduct a school janitor? Probably a high ransom. Don't you know that janitors make millions? That is job discrimination. If the story had nothing to do about magic and it was simply another episode of Law and Order, their case could quickly turn into a homicide investigation because they refuse to actually look into things. They're trying to get in, Daisy pointed down the hallway where two BEM workers knelt at the lock to Miss Natcher's door. One held a flashlight while the other filled with slender lock-picking tools. Y'all were okay with breaking down one door but not another. Why is this where you're drawing the line? Spencer says that he knows it's not his desk because somebody put graffiti on it that says, and I quote, Mrs. N smells like cabbage. He remembers because cabbage was misspelled. Marv says that he added the graffiti to try and make it look more like a desk rather than a magical board. The tornado suddenly folded in on itself, crackling and hissing as it was sucked into the vortex bag. Spencer felt the vacuum bag shudder in his hand. It felt no different than how it had been before, no heavier, no bigger. But as moonlight angled through the classroom's blown-out window, Spencer saw that everything was gone. The classroom was utterly destroyed. He was kneeling on bare concrete. The force of the suction had imploded the walls, tearing the sheetrock like paper. The sink in the back of the classroom had been pulled into the bag. A surge of water shot from the broken pipe, running across the floor like a river. He was alone in this desolation. Glancing up, Spencer saw that the ceiling tiles were gone. The insulation, too, had been sucked away. Sparking wires hung where the lights had been, cracks angled along the bare ceiling almost wide enough to expose the night sky. But among the crooked roof trusses, a twisted metal vent shaft remained, bent askew and dangling precariously. Man, I would hate to be the innocent teacher whose classroom that is, who comes in early on, what is it, a Wednesday morning, maybe with the intention of getting some work done first thing. She goes to unlock the door, except that there isn't even a door anymore, and for sure there's no classroom. Where will you drive the nail? Give it some thought. It's a big decision. Not for me. Spencer held out the objects to Walter. I don't think the rebel underground should have to rely on a 12-year-old warlock, Spencer explained. Granted, I don't think that they'd think to look for a student, but at the same time, it's probably for the best that Spencer give it back to Walter. A mild Armenian accent rang out behind him. I am once again begging the author to explain to us exactly what this sounds like. It's one thing to say stuff like she had a British accent or a French accent but for a fictional country, what does this mean? He couldn't help staring at her Lindorian features, her slanted ebony eyes, her flawless umber skin. She was a rare sight, her people not often welcome outside of Iron Door's borders. Most of the kingdom's even more liberal Zal considered her kind to be savage. Imagine that you're writing a fantasy series. You can write about literally anything that you like, and you actively choose to write about fictional racism. We've both lost something precious. Quick question! What the hell? I can't anymore. I simply cannot. Dan had been kept in Captain Ellis's protective custody. Apparently his irrational actions had endangered herself and others, and he'd been deemed unfit to return as captain for the time being. The only consolation prize of being forced to read about his tantrum, I suppose. Although from what some of the reviews have to say, it's not going to be the last time. Captain Alloway, I'd like to introduce you to Jord Abernath. Jord is also an elemental conjurist, and he will be your new tutor. This was not part of her deal. Alice didn't back down. In fact, she somehow managed to look more imposing than him. Of course it is. You agreed to 2 hours a day. What did you think you were going to do with all that time? Heat crept up Dan's neck. He'd had enough tutelage under his father to last a lifetime, and the idea of submitting to more under his mother was... He moved towards the door. I'm not interested. Quick question. Exactly what happened to the strong, independent, willing to step up and fill his father's shoes boy from the first book? Because right now he's been transformed into a sniveling toddler who constantly throws tantrums. Why had she chosen this path over a life with her family? Why fake her death? The thing that gets me is that when Dan had been reading through her journal, Alice had seemed certain that her son was also an adept. So why had Hiram ended up with him rather than Alice? Did she somehow think that it would toughen him up to spend time with sailors and Dan's abusive father? Speaking of which, this whole thing was getting him no more close to saving her than when he'd been aboard the Wildflower. I don't know what he expected, that he'd summon the god and this store's equivalent of Zeus would show up and be like, Rad, I see no reason why I shouldn't go fetch Sable. And while I'm at it, should I also destroy the evil emperor with, zero problems doing it with such little payment? Why couldn't the creators intercede? Why didn't Lork and Damia do something? Oh, sweetie, you must be new to the entire mythology thing. Most of those gods don't give a hoot about humans. Nobody noticed that Dan had been missing for nearly a day, nor had they noticed anything unusual when Dan's cabin had filled up with water. He let them think that he was simply clumsy and fell into the water as they pulled him back out into the ship. Alice seemed to sense that he had activated the necklace, but didn't say anything. The Lion of the Sea returns. Welcome back to the Maiden, lad. The book wants to so badly paint Dan as this badass who rules his ship with an iron fist, but the truth is that both instances of calling him a lion have been so forced and awkward. You need to go a little easier on your mother, lad. Why in all the four kingdoms should I? She was a shark yesterday. Aye, she was, but for good reason. She's been bruised with the love and affection ye gave and received aboard the Maiden. She witnessed firsthand what she's been missing. She's upset that she chose to be the deadbeat mom, so she's decided to take it out by being verbally abusive towards her only child, whom she abandoned. They get married. We're forced to endure an entire page of the new song Tars wrote, but it literally doesn't matter. Dan marries them. I don't freaking care. Chapter 24 Summary. Sable, Idris, and Eldon are now chased by things. What's that? You wanted more in the chapter summary? I'm sorry. In order for me to write a longer summary, the book actually has to give me something more substantial. The pirate swiveled towards the handsome sailor, all the while flipping a large gold coin through the air. He smiled and then said, "Clasp the snarling one in irons." Casper was overwhelmed in moments. Sable felt helpless as she watched her friends subdued by a half-dozen hulking pirates. Wow, if only there was somebody among you who could teleport all of you away in a heartbeat. Hell, if only there were not one but two people who could manipulate the water and wash the pirates away. And if to know ye hate that emperor as much as us, he's no friend of ours, and if you're fixing to stop what he's got planned, then I think my wife can help ye. Dan's brows rose along with everybody else's. Not only was this pirate woman offering them help, she was apparently married to a woman. Dan had only ever heard rumors of such things. Of course, it was taboo to talk about them, even in the more liberal kingdom of Zal. Actually, it was on the same level as a woman in leadership or being friends with an Iorian. Kind of an odd decision to randomly sneak in some GLBT plus representation in this book and then in the same breath be like, lesbians? I've only ever heard whispered rumors about them. Plus, I'm the one they're hunting. The cove will be safer if I'm gone. Except that her transporting herself away will only draw the attention of the stalkers. Even if she hikes out miles and miles away, her presence will be noted regardless. The library door opened, and the air seemed to grow old and stuffy with Miss Natcher's arrival. One look at her unruly class sent a new streak of gray through her tightly pinned hair bun. As the daughter of a now retired teacher, this speaks to me on a whole other level. From this point on, for the rest of the school year, you were absolutely forbidden from reading any book from the library's biographies section. Oh no, anything but that. You doing okay? Spencer asked. Daisy gritted her teeth in concentration. I'm trying really hard not to get distracted by that table leg over there. It looks shiny. I also love a good table leg, so mood. You must leave Walter until we get things sorted out. A week should do it. The toxides from the bucket will have calmed down by then. We've already done the brainstorming, he said, and we have a plan if you'd let us tell it. There's a private school called New Forest Academy located in Colorado. They run a recruitment program where students experience a week on campus to see if they would be good candidates to attend the academy. I'll drive them, she said. It's a long way, Walter said. Alice shrugged indifferently. I'm no stranger to long road trips, she said. I can get work off on Monday and I'll take them to the academy. Never mentioned is Daisy's parents agreeing to let their only child go to Colorado for a week. Alone. Forget about the forged permission slips and applications to the academy. When their daughter fails to return home, there's a 100% chance that they will call the police. Actually, Daisy said, they might. Remember, Des did some dirty work for the BEM back in September. I did? Des looked around. Remember that substitute, Miss Leslie Charmel? Daisy said she was part of the BEM. She had you take some magic soap into the boys' bathroom to get Spencer. Yeah, Des grinned. You're right, I did do dirty work for the BEM. I'm sure that Leslie has bigger things to think about than some 12-year-old punk she got to do her dirty work for her. If Leslie is even out of her coma now, I'm not sure that the narration ever said. Spencer says that he has an idea, so they go upstairs. He then ties a bunch of jump ropes together and then the plunger on one end. He looks at the window where he can see directly down into the family's new SUV. Alice is naturally like, I don't like this, as I think anybody would in this situation. The SUV tires squealed as they dragged along the roof shingles, leaving 4 tracks of black rubber across the frosted rooftop. I can't even imagine what must be going through the neighbors' mind as they hear that unholy noise. However, when Headmaster Garcia comes back, they realize that this isn't Roger Monroe, as Walter had said, but somebody named Mr. Fletcher, aka Slick. Garcia goes on to explain that Mr. Monroe unexpectedly quit 3 days ago. Although Slick clearly has a lot of skill dealing with toxites, as evident by his handling of the one a moment earlier, Spencer has a weird feeling about the janitor. Only one team will be invited to attend New Forest Academy. Let me explain the rules. Academy instructors will be monitoring you closely during the week, as we will make changes to the teams by adding or removing students until we have the perfect group. That winning group could be any size. It may be more than half of you, it may be only a handful. Everything depends on your performance. You are all bright, I'm sure, but New Forest Academy can only accept the very best. Why do you even bother having the kids pick a team if they're only going to reassign them later? There was safety in numbers. Glancing around the library, Spencer was grateful to be surrounded by other academy recruits, but could the blue team protect him from Slick if the janitor attacked? Full offense, but if somebody that I'd met literally yesterday was suddenly attacked by a man wielding a push broom and a mob, I'd get the hell out of Dodge. And I say this as an adult. Forget about a literal child. If you like my content, you can become a member on Patreon. Now you can join for free and get access to all of my free stuff. For only $1 a month, you can have access to so much, including the context for all of this month's commentary and more. I'll see you next month, guys.